Hello and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today we have a very special guest with us. He is leading an organization that we here at Peterman hold very near and dear to our heart. We've been members now for I believe it's our sixth year, and that is the Nexstar Network. I am pleased to have on and excited to talk a little bit about leadership. I'm sure he has a lot to teach us all, but without any further ado, the president and CEO of the Nexstar Network, Julian Scadden. Welcome to the podcast, Julian.
Thanks for having me, Chad. And yeah, I will teach you a lot because I'm going to teach from mistakes I've made. So I look forward to that.
Perfect. We always learn a heck of a lot more from messing things up than things going right is what I found. So, well, good. Well, before we get started, I did want to, as I was looking at the Zoom call here, and I don't know why I haven't put two and two together on this. So my wife and I are expecting a baby in the middle of August. Actually, she's expecting the baby. I'm there to support all the way. What I didn't put together was that we have decided to name the baby Julian. And I didn't put together the two until literally just now, which is weird. She's like, "Do you know anybody named Julian?" I was like, "Not that I know of."
Nobody's left an impression on my life.
Yeah.
Nobody memorable.
Yeah.
Great name.
Oh, man. But yeah, so kind of a cool connection. We'll have to introduce the two of you here at some point.
I love that. Congratulations.
Yeah. Excited. So I'll stop talking about myself and let you talk. Julian, tell us a little bit about kind of what you do now, what kind of led up to the role that you currently serve in.
What I have the privilege of doing now, and I'll create some framework and definitions. I lead Nexstar Network as president and CEO as of November 2020. And before that, I was the vice president. Before that, I was leading the training team. And before that, I was a coach. But what's interesting, I think, and will help give the listener context for some of the perspective in which I'll speak, I was a member. I ran a plumbing, heating, cooling, and electrical shop out of Atlanta. And so Nexstar Network is based in the Twin Cities area of Minnesota. We're in St. Paul, Minnesota. But I ran a business in Atlanta for many years. And before that, I'd worked with and for Nexstar members. So Nexstar is a member-owned organization. It's a group of members. It's around 900 businesses across mostly the States, some in Canada, some in Australia. And again, this is how I get the privilege of accelerated learning, because I have amazing business leaders like you who we can call and we learn from, and you share with your coaches, or we see you in training. And so we have an accelerated growth at Nexstar, and I currently have the privilege of leading that member-owned organization. And I keep saying that because that's critically important, that everything we do at Nexstar, every penny of profit that we make at Nexstar goes back in the form of goods and services to our membership. So we're not over here getting rich. We're over here enriching the industry and our membership. And it's critically important. I love it. It's a new dynamic for me as a leader. And I want to share this, that when I ran a business and I knew that I was going to, potentially get some equity, payout, dividend, whatever you want to call it annually, I made different decisions. But since I've been here at Nexstar, when I really moved into the operations role as VP, and especially now as CEO and president, learning from my predecessor, Jack Tester, you make different decisions when it's members' money on the line, because you all are month to month. You can leave us at any time. And we have to think, does this have the members' best intentions in mind? And it's a beautiful way to lead. It's almost, I'm sure you've heard this, if you want to test your leadership skills, go to a volunteer organization where you don't have authority, where you're not signing a paycheck. It's not that completely, I'll be honest, because I still have an authoritative position. But it is intriguing in the decisions you make when you are aware that you're spending dollars. So here's what I tell every new hire, and then I promise I'll pause. But here's what I tell every new hire. And this is true. When I was a member and I was just starting up, okay, we had just started our first year, and there were weeks where I wasn't sure how we were going to make payroll. But I never questioned my Nexstar membership. That's how important my business coach was to me. That's how important the training, access to the online tools was to me. So I'll tell a new hire in a moment. I said, a new hire at Nexstar, so somebody who works for Nexstar now, I'll sit them down and I'll tell them, your ability to pay your car note, your ability to pay your mortgage, your ability to take somebody out on a date or go get lunch today, that money that's in your pocket from your paycheck is because one of 900 different members across the nation have chosen not to put that money into their business, but to give it to you because they believe that you're going to return it. And I say this to an accountant, I'll say it to the web access manager, I'll say it to anybody. It's not just the coaches. They believe that you are going to enhance their business. So remember that. They can leave us at any time. They took that dollar they could have bought a new truck with, they could have put a new ad out with, and they gave it to us. And so we think wisely when we spend any dollar knowing that it's your dime. So I get a little passionate about that, and I wanted to point that out. What did that create for you there, Chad?
Yeah, absolutely perfect. I think there's a ton to dive into. You mentioned a lot of fantastic things, and I think that the one thing that you hit on there towards the end was the role that Nexstar plays as kind of the business mentor, or at least I've looked at Nexstar as kind of my mentor as I have taken on this journey. And, you had mentioned you were a coach at one point in time, and my coach for a long time was John Conway, who, literally morning, noon, or night, I could call, text, email, and he would come back with an answer, or, hey, try this, try that, call this member, do whatever. What role has kind of mentorship played in your kind of leadership journey to this point?
Well, it's easy to point at every single one of our coaches. As you mentioned, John was a former Nexstar member. And he'll tell this story, and he can tell it better than me. He was in debt when he met us. We turned it around, made that man profitable, and he did all the work. But that's how he knows. Our coaches know. And so, one of my mentors, Jack Tester, my predecessor in CEO and president, is he would always say it's easier to coach what you've done. He said it's a difficult time to give people, theoretical. I have all these books, right? All these books are great. And here's the analogy I gave Jack. Is, after I stepped into the CEO role a few months in, but as VP for 3 years, I rode alongside. He was preparing me, and I didn't even know it. Some of the early years, I had no clue. He would ask me to make decisions, or he would say things like, what would you do? Or he started to hand it off more to the budget to me, and he was watching me and developing me. But, one of the things that I told him is, for all the theory in the world, and I thought of it like this. So you're going to be CEO. Okay, so let's use this analogy. You're going to swim in the ocean. Okay, got it. So we start in the kids' pool. Maybe I go to a splash park. Okay, this is what water feels like. Then I go to a kids' pool and I get my feet wet. Then I get in a deeper pool. Okay, then I go in the deep end. Okay, then maybe I go in a lake. But that day when you're out there in the middle of the ocean and they tell you to hop out of that boat, it's just different, and things just hit you different. And I know he did a podcast. Jack has a podcast, a Leadership Lounge, and he did an episode with one of our members who was talking about how they went from a GM to starting their own business. And he talked about how as a GM, you have a certain safety net. And as I listened to that, it was so true to me. It was so true. And I don't fault any employee, any GM, as well as I don't vilify any leader or owner, because sometimes it feels like the owner is moving at such a fast pace. Oh my gosh, don't they know how busy we are? Or why would they do that? That's such a risky decision. But when you're in this driver's seat, you've got to make some calls, and you have to push, and you have to be the thermostat, not the thermometer. Another thing that one of my mentors told me, be the thermostat, not the thermometer. I don't need people around me who are thermometers. I know the temperature. I need thermostats who know when to cool it down and when to heat it up. So got on a tangent there about some examples, but Jack was a great mentor of mine in that he took time to give me experience versus theory. He let me make mistakes. He would watch me reflect from my mistakes. He wouldn't let me fall off a cliff. And those are some attributes to me of a true mentor. A true mentor isn't really telling you what to do or how they did it. If it's and maybe the term is sponsor, if I use another term, that can put you in a position or in a place that you normally wouldn't be and allow you to get your hands on the tools, allow you to make a few mistakes. And that to me is where my most valuable lessons came from.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that one of the things I'd like to dig a little bit deeper on is the concept of vulnerability. You mentioned, hey, operating from a GM's perspective, you've got kind of a safety net there, and when you step into that leadership role, people are going to be looking to you to make decisions and make the call, but also at the same time developing those around you, much like you referred to or touched on about how Jack did for you. What role has vulnerability or the ability to be vulnerable helped you in your career?
One of the most powerful things we did as a team, as a leadership team at Nexstar, and now it's an offering that's out there for the mass public, is we have a personality profile we use called Color Code. Color Code will give you your motivations, your behavioral style, but it's more based on your motivations. And that's nice. So you can understand somebody's motives and how to communicate with them. It's just like any other personality profile. But where we took it up a notch is our leadership team did what they call the character code. So the color code is you individually. The character code is essentially a blind 360 survey where you will get feedback from a select group of people about your strengths and limitations. And I'm getting to the point of vulnerability here in just a moment. But what we did is we took it up a notch. We chose not to keep it blind. We said, when we do this, when we get the feedback, we're going to facilitate a session where all 10 of us sit in a room, and we're going to look at our we'll look at our top 3 strengths, but we're going to look at our top 3 limitations as voted on by self and as voted on by our peers. And it just keeps narrowing down. So pretty soon you're going to have, a certain limitation that has 6 votes out of 10. So 60% of the leadership team sees you show up this way. And this is a real limitation. But what was beneficial, even with that feedback, that's good. But what was beneficial, and then each person had to take a turn. So I had to hear 9 different ways that limitation shows up for me by example. And they would say, Julian, here's an example. There was a time when, and you did this, and here's how it felt. And oh my goodness, just hearing the word, whatever it was, one of them is emotionally intense. And I like to cover that and just say, I'm passionate. You guys just can't handle my passion. Oh, you can't handle a little passionate discussion. But the truth is, emotionally intense, it's a little different when you're on the other side of it. And then when I heard the examples from people I respect, I admire, that I love, that are more accomplished than me. And as I sat there and I took it in, and I knew they were right. And my best advice is, when you're getting feedback like that, just as I have today, I've just got, I call it sitting in the burn, and you just write. Because otherwise you want to talk, otherwise you want to defend. And that was the rule. You don't get to respond, you don't get to defend. And the people who are giving the feedback, you don't get to throw pillows. You don't get to say, hey, Chad, I know this was a week where things were really tough. And I know business has been tough too. And you kind of yelled at me a little. It's like, no, Chad, you have the tendency, and I've seen it more than once, when you're upset, you just walk into my office unannounced, you interrupt what I'm doing, and you throw something on my desk. It makes me feel like you think you're more important than what I'm working on. It's not in a mean way. It's just very direct. And you go, gosh, I do that. And you hear that from somebody. So, that's one side of vulnerability that really helped us grow. So I wanted to share that tool, because that's something you could take action on. That's something you can do. And then the other thing I want to talk to is a little bit more from a personal experience for anyone that this might help. I dropped out of high school and went to digging ditches with a mom and pop. That's how I got in the trades. I was a sewer line ditch digger. And I'll tell you, I'd never shared that story probably until the past 4 years, because I was so scared that, and like I've been at Nexstar 8 years as an employee. I was so scared that if anybody found out that I was coaching, that I was a high school dropout. And that's probably why I read so many books, and I go to so many classes, and I do so much work on myself, because I was so scared of people finding out I didn't go to college. I hated it when people, because I believe I'm so well read. What school did you go to? That's an uncomfortable moment when you feel like that qualifier could make you less than. But what I found is, the more I've shared my story, homeless between 14 and 16. So I dropped out. So I got to work. And the more I share that story, the number of people that I never would have suspected, you guys look like you're all good. You look like you got it all figured out. You look so polished. And they walk up and they go, Julian, I had something just like that. Hey, man, I was homeless too. Hey, I raised my brothers and sisters. Hey, I couldn't finish school. I'm dyslexic. And it's just like, whoa. So those are the 2 areas where vulnerability gave me, I guess, a J curve type growth in connecting with other people.
Yeah, I think that you hit kind of the nail on the head with the feedback, the character code. That was one that Jack had actually shared with me prior to doing his podcast, and now it's been like 2 years, maybe something like that. But he showed me that card that you guys had all made that had those things on there, and he was talking about how powerful it was, because oftentimes in leadership roles, the people that could give us the feedback that could be the most beneficial are in a position where that's, it's uncomfortable. I'm not going to give my boss any feedback like that. And then we too aren't super receptive to receiving it. So I guess from you, and I look at you as someone who is very in tune with the role of feedback and having those direct and honest conversations. What do you do as a leader to, obviously, character code, color code, all of those are examples of things that can facilitate feedback. What else do you do from your position as leader now? So with you being in charge, obviously it's probably a little bit more difficult for someone on your team to give you feedback. What do you do to facilitate that feedback and to keep the lines of communication really, really open.
Thank you. I'll start with the orientation, the welcoming of a new hire to Nexstar. We start with our guiding principles. I don't expect you'll be able to see them clearly, but this graphic back here is an example of the 6 guiding principles we have. And one of them is see it, say it directly and with respect. So if you see something that's out of character, something that's incongruent, if you see it, you say it directly and with respect. You don't go to a manager to go to their manager to talk to them, and now we've got these weird, strange relationships. And what I'll talk to a new hire about is I'll tell them that there's a non-negotiable, that they have a responsibility, and I'll give you guys a speech here so you can still adapt it however you like if it connects with you. So we'll be talking, we're in the orientation, and I like to, make a statement to get their attention first, and then I'll expand on it. And one of them is, I'll just look at them, I'll say, look, I'm ignorant. I need you to know that right now. And when I say ignorant, the definition of ignorant, when I use it in this term, means a lack of information or knowledge. So there's going to be a day, there's going to be a time, and it may be a staff meeting, it may be a one-to-one interaction, it may be you overhearing me talk to somebody else, and I'm going to say something that just hits you wrong. And, it could be a term, it could be the language, it could be the context, it could be anything. But you have a responsibility, and there's a non-negotiable here at Nexstar, that if you see my ignorance and you have information that would help me and you don't give it to me, you don't belong here. It's just that simple. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be weird. And you owe that to every employee. But the reason I'm saying this is because I'm the president and CEO. And I'm telling you right now, it'll be easier with your peers, even though that's going to be uncomfortable. But you owe me that. What you don't have the right to do and remain employed here is to go sideways, meaning you tell the person that sits next to you, oh, did you hear what Julian said in that staff meeting? He's such a bonehead. He's such a caveman. Nobody talks like that anymore. But you never come and tell me. You don't get that right. You just don't. And I'll talk directly to people like that. Like, you don't have the right. Don't cash another check here if you're doing that game. Just go somewhere else. We don't need you. So that's a tee up of a non-negotiable expectation, responsibility. But as far as a pattern and a cadence, what we'll do at the end of meetings is we'll rank each other. And I'll do this, we could have some coaches come in and present an idea or a concept, maybe the marketing coaches, which is an area I'm weak in. Even as a member, I always went to my marketing planning workshop because I'm weak in marketing. I like to surround myself with smart people in that. And so with that knowledge, now as coaches, they'll bring a concept or an idea, and as CEO, and this, Chad, sometimes you'll say something and they'll take it as a directive when it's really a question, or you say something and people go, oh, okay, don't push back. And what we'll do is, if I'm sensing that, so the number one thing is I do my best to save my opinions till last. I just want to listen, give some feedback, entertain. I'll ask people, what did you hear in that? What's your interpretation of that? So I want to hear them feedback so I can hear how I'm sounding to them. And at the end, we rank each other. And I'll say, okay, on this meeting, 1 to 10, how would you rank my listening? How would you rank my feedback? How would you rank my thoughtfulness? And if you give me a 10 all the time, we're going to have a conversation. And that's the difference, Chad, because you can always have little tools like this. And people go, oh, yeah, I'm still a 10. No, come on, man. I was a 10. And I'll call myself, like, I cut you off earlier. You were making a point and I just jumped on you. That's a 6 at best, the way I did that. Come on, let's get real. And then the more you do it, and the more frequency, and the more it becomes a habit and a pattern and a cadence, that's when it gets easier for people to just kind of check and say, hey, Julian. And so what I did, another thing I've done is I've created 2 terms. I want to be, and again, I make up my own definitions on things, but then I explain them to people. I want to be convicted. As you can even tell as I'm talking here, I get excited, I get passionate, sometimes emotionally intense, which isn't always fun. But I get convicted. If I really believe something in my heart, I believe that Nexstar is member owned. I believe we owe you the best. I believe those things. I have a conviction. You're not going to sway me from that. The difference is when I'm being rigid, and rigid is tied to self-righteousness. From my experience, from what I believe, from what I want. And fortunately, the current VP, Carrie Fraser, who I love, you can't have a right hand if you don't trust them completely, implicitly, and totally, unconditionally. And her and a few other key leaders who have now known me over the past 8 years, they'll tell me. And the others are watching and they're learning. And they'll say, Julian, I think you're rigid on this one. And so I give them those definitions and I tell them the words. Hey guys, am I getting emotionally intense here? How does it feel to be on the other side of me? No, I hear conviction. I hear conviction on that, Julian. Good. Julian, I think you're getting a little rigid on this. I'm going to ask you to pause and gather some more information. And as soon as I hear that word rigid, I'll use the word ashamed. I'm not ashamed, but you get that feeling like, oh, the coyote, when he doesn't realize he's off the edge of the cliff until he's out there and he's like, oh, and he falls down. When I hear that word, that's how I feel. I go, oh, Oh, thank you, thank you, you just thank them profusely, and you thank them again. You send them a thank you handwritten note. You go, thank you for calling me out in that meeting. You thank them when the project's done. You say, this project went better because we did a pre-mortem when we were going in. You told me how it was going to die ahead of time. You called me out early, and the more that we can model it. But those are some of the cadences. As you can tell, I can get into tangents. So thank you.
No, and not in the least. That was just some really powerful information. I've got quite a few notes here on things that I can do better from a leadership perspective. Because yeah, it's the thing you said at the outset was, people, when you give your opinion, can take that as a directive, and it's like, whoa, I just simply, I don't even know anything about this situation. I just thought I'd throw something in there.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
To the point where I have excluded myself sometimes from meetings from an operational standpoint, because like I did this just yesterday. I was like, I have something to work on. I kind of looked at the agenda like, hey, they're going to be making some decisions and I'd really like them to make those, because when I'm in the room, it can sometimes be everybody gives their opinion and then everybody looks to me like, so what should we do? And I don't want that to happen. So what would be your opinion as far as excluding yourself entirely, or what sounds maybe like a little better idea is what you've done is really laid down some ground rules?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I'm glad you brought that up too, because you don't need to be in everything. I'm going to go back to mentorship and give an example too on this one. So yeah, there's a department that, as I transition into CEO, there's two departments as I transitioned into president CEO, that it can make sense for them to keep reporting to me. The two groups that I really enjoyed, and I really wanted to keep them, but it wasn't right. There were some major initiatives coming down the line. We have a new operator in place. I needed to show her I trusted her and had faith in her, and I just had to take my hand off the wheel. But back to a leadership lesson that Jack gave me one time, as I'm in the VP role, and for those of you that know DISC, the DISC profile assessment, I'm a C. So I'm conscientious. I like details, and I'm a perfectionist. Sounds like a bunch of fun. But then as I moved, so as great as an individual performer, heck, that's why they like me so much. I had spreadsheets, I had everything organized. We were on time. That's what those are some of the attributes that I believe got me to the operator role. But I know one time I came to Jack and I'm talking about a group and something they were presenting to me. And I just said, oh, Jack, I don't think it's their best work. And the number one thing that he taught me that I'm still not as good as him at is just listening. And he'll ask questions. Many times he doesn't even give an opinion. He'll just keep asking questions, and I'll land on my own answer. I'm getting better, but he's a master. So I'm talking about this group and I go, I don't know, this is their best effort, but tell me more. And he's always listening for, is it the term he'll use is it a salvation issue? Is anybody going to perish? And it wasn't. It really wasn't. It was just me being particular, me being rigid. And let's just say, for example, there are 3 people in the group. And what he said, I'll never forget. He said, Julian, so what you're telling me is if you had this project, you would deliver a 10. You have the ability, you have the understanding, the competency, and the skills to deliver a 10. And what you're saying that these 3 individuals are giving you 3 sevens. And I said, exactly. He said, well, Julian, I just want you to know that their 3 sevens, that's bigger than your 10. I said, oh boy. And even within that, it was like, doggone it. How else are they going to learn? And that's when I started to get the experience understanding, like he was letting me fail, but I wasn't letting others fail. I was wanting to jump in and get in it and course correct. And that group is so much stronger now. And this was years ago. And off of that lesson that they presented the thing and they came back to me with all the little things that I knew. And they came back like, oh, here's what we noticed. And it was like, yes, good. They caught it, but when you're so close to something, you can't. That's the beauty of perspective too. Earlier when I said I'll never fault a leader or owner, and I'll never fault an employee. Sometimes employees will come to you, and this, dude, crazy stuff like, hey, we should change our commission to 50% of everything and not take out any materials. And you're just like, where is your head? Like you're questioning if they even value the business. It's just like they're greedy. You start to make up all these stories about them. But the truth is they just have a different perspective. And usually if you can give more information, they have ignorance, just like I said earlier. And if you can give them more knowledge, more information, and if they're receptive to it, that's all it is. They just didn't have that perspective. And people, for the most part, the selective hiring, you surround yourself with good people, but people for the most part, they're not bad people. It's all a perspective issue. I found the more information you can give, the easier it is.
Yeah, I think that that is something that we're working on currently, and it's really in our business we have a distinct dynamic that I think we have to sometimes revert back to a better understanding of, in that it's that 2/3 of our people are out in a truck by themselves. And then you have the office dynamic. And there again, everyone has a different perspective. And oftentimes it's the directives coming from the office out to the field and go do this. And there's no explanation of why.
Yeah.
And so what we created, or actually our operations manager, who does an unbelievable job, created what she calls a task force. And it's basically people from each department that would be affected by a change. And so they meet, I'm not sure how frequently they meet. I want to say maybe once a month. And they meet, and it's technicians, it's people from dispatch, people from the call center, people from, our training department, whatever it may be. And we bring up an issue. And oftentimes what we hear is, oh, well, yeah, I mean, I just thought that we just did it that way because you guys wanted to make our lives terrible. It's
Exactly.
like, no.
That's surely why.
Yeah. And it's once you start understanding that why, it makes things a heck of a lot clearer in that perspective, for sure.
So good.
Yeah.
Love it. Love the task force. I stole that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I wanted to dive into, just because we've talked a little bit about kind of the vulnerability, we've talked about your mentor, Jack, who I'm sure some of the people listening to this have met him and talked with him. Yes, I don't know that there is a better question asker than that man. He knows how to really pull out and like you said, really mentor and develop people by letting them fail. And or letting them learn. What is it? And I ask this question simply because, one, I struggle with this. And then I know that some of our leadership team struggles with it as well. And it has to do with the subject of a one-on-one and the importance that those play within a business. And what I'd like to get from you are some of the tips, because some of the things you've said have just really brought to the surface, how engaged you are in conversation. And I think that's one of the keys of having a good one-on-one. What are some of the things you try to do when you have one-on-ones with maybe your direct reports that allows for better communication, a better understanding, whatever it may be? What are some of those things you try to do, whether it's lay out the ground rules like you talked about earlier, or other items that you may use in that particular setting?
I think I want to take a step back, and then we'll step into the specifics. This topic reminds me of a service call and the training that we have in our industry. And a lot of the training in our industry is how to overcome objections. And that's sexy, and that's sales. And a lot of people send their technicians or salespeople to those type of classes, how to overcome an objection. And what I believe strongly, is that if you have an entire process or a system, you can proactively clear those objections before they start to compile. Because by the time the objection is that strong and it's vocalized, it's like, now you're just using psychology and tricks. And it's like, just answer their concern. You don't need to overcome. First, look at the language, overcome an objection. It's like, what? How about just answer their doggone question? Why is it an objection? Why isn't it just a question? And so, but my point is that, especially with one-to-ones, I want to talk a little bit about the structure and how that helps, because I can talk about some of the art that happens in the conversation, but it's really the science of the structure. And this is where I think many businesses get it wrong, which is why I think this is important. It's got to be sacred time. It has to be scheduled every week at the same time, at the same place. It's not in passing. It's not oopsie, and every week it's at a different time, different day. You're getting off to a bad start there. Again, I can teach you all of the language tricks in the world. I've read a lot of those books. That's not how we want to live. We want to build a good, trustworthy foundation first. And nothing says you're more important to me than a standing meeting. The most important meetings of my week happen Monday. And that's my one-to-one with the VP, the one-to-one with the finance director, and the one-to-one with our executive director. Those are my 3 direct reports. Those happen on Monday. We set the week. And then we do our level 10, our manager or leader meeting, language from the book Traction or the EOS system. And those are critically important, but back to the one-to-one. It has to be consistent. Second thing, there has to be a form that the direct report fills out. Now, before your ears get all twisted up, listeners, it's going to be different for somebody in the field. Okay, it's going to be more concise. It's going to be shorter. The time frame will be, I'm saying, but it still has to happen, and they still have to lead it. And we have forms in the way that we talk about it, and you have to let them lead. So I'll have notes and thoughts and idea from the week as it progresses, and I'll just put them in the file. So let's just, again, talk about our VP Carrie. I'll have a little Carrie file, and I'll just put things in. I don't need to pepper her with an email with every thought I have if it can wait until the one-to-one. All right. And it's the same thing for your direct reports. They don't need to pepper you with every little thing if it can wait. Now, if it's urgent, for sure. But what you'll realize is by spending that time together and sitting down and letting them lead, the most important thing, why the one-to-one is most critical, what the one-to-one is truly about, the one-to-one is not about reporting. It's not about reporting metrics. And the one-to-one, I don't hear where our revenue is at. We do that in a separate meeting. I don't hear where the margins are at. We do that in a separate meeting. The one-to-one is about leadership, development, and identification. It's so I can see how you're thinking. And a leader will talk about the future. A follower will talk about yesterday. So tomorrow, here's what's upcoming. Those are the conversations that interest me. And just notice that when you're sitting in a one-to-one, if the person just constantly talks about, and here's what happened yesterday, and this happened because, and reasons and excuses, and this happened. It's like, okay, well, you'll notice that your leaders start talking about solutions. Yesterday, we had an incident. Here's how I've addressed it. Here's my next thoughts. And then they'll say something like this. What am I not thinking of? What else should I think of? Because they're saying, I'm already running down the road. Is there a blind spot I'm not thinking of? Oh, I love leaders like that. So you let them lead. You get away from your phone, from your computer. You push back. Like I literally move our chairs away so we can't even glance over and see a monitor. This is on paper. We're facing each other. We're just talking, and they talk and they lead the whole time. And then when they're done, they've usually answered any of the sticky notes that I had to bring up. And if they don't, I bring them up at the end. So the way that I think the conversation, to the question you asked, the way that the conversation is groomed is first in the system and the consistency and the awareness that they fill out the document, they lead the meeting, because it only takes one uncomfortable or two uncomfortable meetings where they don't bring anything, and they understand that that's the expectation, and you give them that clear expectation that, this is unacceptable. This is your time to tell me what's important to you, what you want at, what you've been challenged with. And, this can't happen again. And I'll use very direct language like that. It's not mean. It can't, because I like setting very clear boundaries. And the flip side of that, for all the strong language I'm using with you today, when I talk about non-negotiables, you have a responsibility and this is unacceptable. I love the heck on my people. I love on them constantly. So that way, when it is, I've raised 5 children, 2 grandchildren. So look, I get it. I can say some very direct things because my love is never in question. But I would say the conversation flow within it, Chad, is really let them go first. Let them tell a lie. Listen to the language context they're using, ask good questions, and just keep asking them questions and help them think through things. That's the magic.
Yeah, absolutely. That is some tremendous advice. I've got an entire half-page notes written down because I think that, for the one thing that is to me sometimes where I struggle. What do you do to prepare? Obviously, they're bringing the sheet. You're maybe making some notes that you think of during the week and things like that. But what do you mentioned the word sacred time, which I wrote down in bold letters, or I guess capital letters. I don't know how I could write in bold. I guess scratch it over a couple times. But sacred time, how do you prepare as a leader for that? And then on the flip side of that, you are dealing, and I find myself in this particular spot, the people that are reporting to me are high performers. Like they're running that race. They're going at it, probably thinking about things that I haven't even thought of. They're doing that. And I'm sure you have those on your team too. Where do you find yourself fitting in with them? Because sometimes I struggle with that. Like it feels like they're doing all right. Like they don't have anything to tell me. Like they're doing their role. So how do you prepare? And then how do you handle those high performers in trying to develop them even further?
Very good. Very good. So sacred time, the calendar is blocked, the door is closed, the ringer is off. And we do ask that the form is sent over prior to the meeting, so I do have time to review, because that'll help me with some notes too and deeper questions. I personally, I report to the chairman of the board. So, for anybody listening, look, Nexstar is truly governed by a board of directors made up of 9 members, and I serve at their pleasure. I'm the only role at Nexstar that the board can remove. Everybody else is safe. So I have a boss too, and I have my weekly one-to-one. Now mine is different though, because mine is reflective. So I have mine on Friday with the chair, and I'm telling him all the stuff that's on my mind and everything that's going on. But back to the point here, all I wanted to make the point of is that, send the form out ahead of time so the person that you're reporting to has time to reflect. And this helps, Chad, because this will help you develop questions. And especially on those high performers, these people who want to send you the thing, nothing this week, they'll put in the line, nothing big this week. It's like, oh, come on. And, what was the most impactful phone call you had today? What was the most challenging interaction you had this week? Who's shining on your team? Because the other thing is the direct reports that report to me have direct reports. So they have to rank their direct reports with a 1 through 10 ranking. And this helps us keep a pulse on the organization. And so we can see, even if they don't report to me, I can see that maybe you ranked a trainer at a 7 this week. Well, tell me about that. Well, they struggled because of this. Oh, okay. Now I have a deeper context and I can ask deeper questions. And those high performers who think they've got it going on, now I'm prepared with some questions for them because I know that that sheet's coming in not all the way filled out. So I start thinking about what questions, or give me some color on the latest prospect you talked to. Who is the most impressive person? Who do you think is going to close, or who do you think is going to get away, and why? So it's not really about their performance. It's about how they think. Why do you think they're going to get away? Why do you think they're going to close? Why do you think that, whoever your direct report is struggling? And again, for those high performers, I make them think about their peers. Who on your team? We call it the first team, and we take that from Patrick Lencioni, that the leadership team is the first team. You're not responsible for your department. And the sooner that you can get your department their heads around this, that they're proud, they hit their budget, they're proud of their people's conversion rate, they're proud of their call count, whatever it is. And that's great. That's reporting. That's not their first team. Their first team is the makeup of install, call center, dispatch, sales, service, warehouse, all the leaders that make up every department in the business. That's your first team, because without a winning business, you don't have a department. And so you have to get clear. So then with the high performers, what I'll do is I'll shift to, how's your peer? What peer did you struggle with this week? What peer's communication style seems that you have to revisit? So I just keep pointing them back to team development, because that's what high performers, what I think personally and what I've seen, high performers need more than anything is team development, because they're so used to being individual performers. And if they've made their way to a spot in a leadership position, that's dangerous. It can be really dangerous when they're looking to outperform others or outsmart others or be smarter than others or whatever it is. That's a great opportunity. And now, with that said, though, I know Jack told me once when he was my coach, I was complaining about an employee. And what I found out after this comment he made is that the one employee that was getting on my nerves was actually the winner. He said, Julian, he said, it's easier. He said, would you rather rein in a thoroughbred or kick a mule? Because this person was a thoroughbred. They were bringing me all these ideas. And I was complaining because I thought they were just a busybody. But then what I realized, as soon as he said that, would you rather rein in or direct a thoroughbred, or would you rather kick a mule? Then I realized, and I looked around the business, and within that one conversation, my perspective of the entire business changed. Everybody else was mules. Everybody else, every other leader I had was waiting for me to tell them what to do. And it felt so good, Chad. You know this, because when the business is smaller, when revenue's low, you do need to be the spark of all energy. Like, you do have to, there's not a lot of time for questions and tell me what you think. When we're at 1 million, 2 million, it's like, no, you go do this, you go do that, and you get over here. Like that's normal. But you have to let that go as you grow. And what I looked and I saw in that business, I had a bunch of people, and it felt good to be the answer man. And none of them had ideas. That one person who had all the ideas, I was treating like they were wrong, but they were innovative. And so keep that in mind too, when we look at these high performers. Are they truly a thoroughbred who needs direction? Or are they just looking for stature and want to be better than everybody else? And that's a different conversation.
Yeah. The one thing I want to dig into, because I think this is something that I talk to other leaders of other businesses probably most, is a lot of them, I mentioned earlier, I don't go to some of the meetings, or, try to allow, one of the biggest qualities I try to, embrace is that of letting people do their thing. Getting out of their way is oftentimes the best thing we can do in a leadership role. Obviously, interacting with over 900 businesses, you've seen your fair share of companies growing, leaders kind of transforming. What is, along with, making sure that you're not that spark of, the spark of every idea as your business grows, what's some other advice that you would give to that leader that their business is growing and they too have to grow in their leadership role to take on a different role as you get more and more high performers into the business?
Well, I think it's just a really ice cold, stark admission based on experience, like you said, based on the case study that we have, that your business will stagnate. Your dreams will not come true at a certain point. if you think you have to, if you cannot empower others, if you don't trust others, it's all built on trust first. And again, going back to Lynn Choney, and I do cite these books because we have put them in place in the 5 dysfunctions of a team. You as Nexstar members, or anybody listening who's a Nexstar member, you have access to, we made a video series around this that you should do with your leadership team. It's a 6-part video series under the Building Leaders series segment on the website. And it's an exercise that you can do with your leadership team, and you should. And it takes you through those 5 dysfunctions, but the pillar being trust. So the thing is, as a leader, Chad, and I see it, I see it. I see members that I knew when I was a member who are still in the exact same revenue position, and that was 10, 13, 15 years ago, and they're still in the same position. And I can see why. I see it in their behaviors. They're rigid, they're righteous, and they're entitled. Okay. They've got their nice house. They got their dream house. They got their boat. Life is good. Why should I change? And then they lament that the business won't grow. So they're getting good money out of the business. They're living a good life, but the business won't grow. And here's, I'd be interested. I love, just the title here, Can't Stop the Growth. I love watching what you've created over there, because you've had some amazing success. You run a great business. You're a driven individual. And so there has to be things that you've done, but you have to start in the mirror first, is to the question you've asked. It's hard. Yeah, I get it. It's difficult. It's scary. People are going to burn you. That old thing. If I trust too much, they're going to get me. Yeah, they're going to get you either way, bud. So you got to have processes and systems in place to catch it as quick as you can. But you can't live your life. Well, you can live your life that way. I haven't seen it be beneficial. Get your slice versus making a bigger pie. It's a mentality. But you do have to grow, and you do have to change. And I speak from experience as somebody my whole life, man. You look, from digging ditches to answering phones to running calls to then running businesses. It's like, there's so much on my heart to having an answer. A kid from the streets, it's like, you never want to look wrong, because they're just going to leave me in the dust if they find out I don't know what I'm talking about. That's deeply seated in my mind to this day. But the truth is, the more generosity, humility, mixed with tenacity, mixed with integrity that I can bring to this business, then, the better it's just going to be. But you've got to get into a growth mindset. You have to let go. But this gets back to team building. This gets back to how you recruit, how you hire, how you onboard, how you train, the experiences you give them, and you'll see, it gets so much easier. I'll tell the leadership team constantly, and I make sure that our board of directors knows, anytime praise is given, and they're pretty well trained now where they do just give praise directly to the staff and the other leaders. It's not me. It really isn't. Like, I can cast a vision, I can set direction, I can help give perspective to people to help them make better decisions. But I don't need to make, specific decisions. I don't need to look at each vendor. I don't need to read each contract, because we have people in place now that I implicitly trust, excuse me, whatever the right word is, but I trust them.
Yeah.
And they're put in the right seat. So you have to be honest with yourself, Chad. And I'll pause right here though. But you have to know, because it's not just about trust. You have to be honest, and you have to assess, are they in the right seat to make those decisions? Because if they're not, it's on you. You cannot delegate tough conversations as a leader in a business. You must have those passive aggressive comments, hoping that their peers will, that they'll look and learn. That's not going to cut it. So once you know that you have the right person in the right place, you're willing to have the tough conversations, and they've got the skills, buddy, you'll flirt. They're way smarter than you. Trust me, they're smarter than you. The person that we have in finance, look, I can tear a P&L up. I can get into a balance sheet. Let's talk some cash flows. But the finance director we have now would just murder me in 2 seconds flat. And it makes me happy. The creative services team we have now, I can't think of the stuff they think of. But here's the deal, and you know this. I'm in a seat now where they'll bring me, and here's another thing for you leaders, when you're help developing somebody. I just shared this the other day, and the person took it and ran with it. Remind your direct reports as they're developing their learning, bring me something to edit, not something to author. Because I don't like dealing with direct reports who bring me something and go, what would you do? And now I have to author a solution. Now I have to think of everything. So give me something to edit. As a leader, I can edit anything. You go, hey, here's the problem. I've got 3 different ideas. Well, I can slash, red line, circle, under, highlight, combine. And then Chad, this is the mix. This is where it gets weird, because then they think we're so smart. Oh gosh, I didn't even see all that. You're so smart. I can edit the heck out of anything. Bring me something 80% done, and I can shine it up, and it's going to look great. You've done the bulk of the work. So bring me something to edit, not something to author, and make sure that people have that mentality. And went on a little bit there, but man, that you got trust them, but make sure they've got the skills, make sure they're in the right seats, and make sure that you're constantly coaching.
Yeah, I think it, I know, what was it, last September, October at the super meeting, they had Maxwell there, and he talked about the law of the lid.
Yeah.
And, if you've read 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, that's a book that anybody who joins our leadership team, they get that book, because I think that's just such a great roadmap, as far as what you need to be looking for,
Mhm.
and is something that I think you illustrated beautifully. There it is right there. I see
Yeah.
it. But yeah, you got it. And I just think that so many people, like you said, are so rigid, and the business is not going to change, and by change I mean grow, until you decide what you're willing to change.
Mm,
And sometimes in a leadership role we get caught in this, well, I don't need to change, I mean, I'm in charge, so everybody just needs to do what I say. And it's not until we understand what we're going to have to change, what we're going to have to look like in an organization that has 100 more people or
mm,
200 more people, what role are we going to need to play? And that role, as you pointed out so beautifully, is it's different at every level.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're going to have, the business will change undoubtedly. And oftentimes people talk about that $5 million wall, that $10 million wall, all of those. But I think that the key is understanding, what are those walls for you personally? What
I
are
love
those
that.
things that you're going to have to jump over, that you're going to have to get comfortable with? What are the tough conversations that you're going to have in order to get to that wall? And to me, once you are comfortable with that, then you start to break through those walls pretty darn easily, because you're allowing the organization to run rather than preventing its growth all the time.
Ooh, I love what you said there. And the only thing I want to add is I do believe you have to become a master recruiter and team builder, because the more that you can recruit smart people and build teams, and that's what I tell each one of our leaders, is that it's your team. You have to build your team. You might hire somebody I would have never hired, but if you see it and you can work with them and they'll bring value to the membership and their peers, run with it. You have to build your team, like coach your misfits. Like and I said, yeah, I can't wait till the staff hears some of this, but I tell them in their face, like, some of these teams are just weird. Oh, you guys are weird. You're crazy. A lot of you are bizarre. And they look at me and they think the same thing. And they're so beautiful. And you know how happy that makes me, Chad? Because the one thing that makes me happy is there's a surface level of our surface layer of diversity in our industry. And I'm just going to tell you now, I'm going to use your platform to make a quick point. I don't like it when people look at me and they go, "Oh, Julian, tell us the story of the poor kid, the brown kid from the streets, and you made." It's like, quit using me for that stuff. All right, I'm not here to be your flag of diversity, because we're still not diverse. Okay, we're not as far as look, but I still call that surface layer. The diversity I'm speaking of is diversity of thought. So when I joke and I call these people weirdos and creeps and you guys are so crazy, and it's like, man, they've had so many different experiences. And I've had people, gosh, I want to use a good term here, but on an org chart, people that are very far removed from me. And I'm going to use this term from the streets, that have checked me. They've checked my thinking. They've just, "Hey, Julian, you got a minute?" Pop into the office. "Yeah, come on in." And they just go, "Hey, I want to tell you something. I don't know about this." And I just go, "Gosh, thank you." Like, man, I never would have thought of that. Hire smart people and people that challenge you and put them in the right place. And I just love the way you said that, though. How do you have to change at every level? Because everybody talks about that. I need a team at this level. I need more trucks. I need, when do I start building a technical training center at this level? Like, when do I? It's like, no, buddy. How do you behave? You nailed that, man. I love that.
Yeah, well, and I think what you just said is very relevant as far as, being that master recruiter. There's no playbook for, well, I need a person who can do this, 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 and this. No, you need a person who fits your team.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, I'm a huge sports guy, that a new team oftentimes wins the championship every year. Well, if you look at the makeup of that team, they all win it in different ways. And you always hear about the new whiz bang way that they're playing, or
Right.
playing defense, or they've got this offense that really works. And it's like, well, why didn't they just do it just like the team did last year? Well, it's because they have different pieces. Understanding who you are as the leader, and then understanding who your pieces are, yeah, then you can start to mold and start to actually encourage their growth, as opposed to trying to fit someone into a box of, well, you need to do it this way because, well, that's the way I think you need to do it. And I think that openness and ability to see everybody and see their talents as unique and as something that can add to the group is extremely, extremely important when it comes to, as you said, the important piece of team building for sure.
And that's a skill. That's a skill. As you talked about growth as a leader, you have to be okay with people being smarter than you. You have to be okay with people looking better than you. You have to be okay with people being faster than you. And man, that's part of it, man. Building
Yep.
teams is what I've witnessed here in the hyper growth businesses that are doing great. Their ability to build teams and leadership teams, that's what makes it happen.
Yeah, for sure.
And you've got some great people. I've interacted with some of your folks already. No, I'm so impressed by some of the people I get to work with from your team. It's like, gosh, no wonder they're doing great.
Yeah, we are very, very blessed here to have people that just have really, it almost takes me back sometimes. Obviously, having a ownership stake in the company, you treat it one way, but I have just been so humbled by the ownership that all of our people take in the success of the business. And,
Mm.
for everyone from people who answer the phone to technicians, like they want to do a good job because they want to represent the team well. And for me in my position, like I can't ask for any more. And their buy-in is just second to none. And, you're right. It is a lot of fun to build something special with special people. And it's just really cool. The ideas that come out and the different perspectives and all of those things are really special. So I appreciate you pointing that out about them. Well, I tell you what, as we wrap up, I'm sure we could talk for hours, but I'm sure you also have things to do. So as we wrap up here, is there anything from a leadership perspective? You shared so many great insights. Again, like I said, I think I've got 2 pages of notes and is the main reason why I hope this podcast has an effect on others, because there is so many good things in here that we can do to develop ourselves as leaders. What would you say to that listener out there that, has listened to a couple of things and really seen that, okay, this is where I need to go? What would you share with them as maybe some words of encouragement or, just a little tidbit that they could take right today and use it to improve their leadership?
Thank you. I would offer, just especially if you're already in a position of leadership, is to speak less and listen more. And that's why these podcasts are tough for me. I've done a couple now, and I'm so interested in your story, Chad. And I've stopped myself like 3 times from turning a question back to you because I have to remember that I'm supposed to be the guest. But I'm so interested in people, and that, unfortunately, that's a natural attribute that I have. And I would invite a leader to just be interested, just listen more than you talk, and that's the start. That's the start of the practice. And it's difficult for people who are I see it difficult for people who might process a little faster than others or think quicker than others. It's not easy, and it's definitely not easy for the rigid. So in the moments when I know the answer or I think I know the answer, I'm not good at it. So I would start there. I think that's part one. And then the big goal, which you pointed out, and it struck me so strongly, I have my note here and I want to point back to it, is vulnerability, humility, is just knowing what do I need to work on now. So whether it's taking that 360 survey, whether it's getting that feedback, you're the only thing in the way of the growth of the business. And the work that you've done speaks to your results, Chad, and that's why you have a great business and you're continuing to grow.
Thank you, Julian. I really appreciate that. And as we wrap up, I think the one thing that we've really spelled out here is that and it's one of our core values here at Peterman, is lead ourselves. And we are all leaders, regardless of our position, our title, our place on a team. And every morning that you wake up is a great opportunity to look in that mirror and decide how you're going to show up for others, whether that's listening more, speaking less, whether that's being vulnerable, whether that's asking for feedback. All of these things are going to contribute to how you show up for others. And ultimately, in my mind, that is leadership. Showing up for others, serving others, the care and compassion that we exhibit on a daily basis is ultimately going to determine our results. So with that being said, again, thank you so much for your time, Julian. Can't wait to catch up with you. I got my invitation to Marco Island, got it cleared with the wife. That's only going to be a couple of months after
the baby.
Julian's going to be
Julian.
here. Yep. So I have it cleared. So I'm excited to see you down there here in what is just a couple of short months, which is crazy to think about, that we're already nearing the last quarter of the year here very shortly. So thank you again, audience. Keep growing out there. Every day is an opportunity to get better. And until next time, we'll see you.